New Orleans, a city best known for its tourist attractions, culture, food, and Hurricane Katrina. In 2005, the city witnessed a historical event, a natural disaster that, to this day, has an effect on the city and the people who live there. Hurricane Katrina struck the city with wind speeds of over 100 miles per hour and a storm surge of up to 15 feet in some places. Although the initial impact of the hurricane didn't undo the city of New Orleans, the storm surge did, and Hurricane Katrina became one of the nation's deadliest and costliest hurricanes. The total damage amounted to over $100 billion and cost the lives of nearly 2,000 people. How did this happen?
Just as a tornado is a swirl of wind over land, a hurricane is a swirl of wind over water. On August 23rd, Hurricane Katrina, known as Tropical Depression 12 at the time, started her journey over the warm Caribbean Ocean. With the sea surface temperature being a toasty 85 degrees Fahrenheit, warm air rising from the surface of the ocean formed a system of thunderstorms. As condensation occurred, energy was released in the form of heat, adding more warmth to the rising air. This constant motion of rising air from the sea surface created a circulating pattern of wind, with more warm air and moisture to feed off of. Eventually, Tropical Depression 12 reached a wind speed of 39 miles per hour and Tropical Storm Katrina was born. Normally, tropical storms spin out their lives uneventfully in the middle of the ocean, but Katrina was on a different path. From the Caribbean Ocean, Tropical Storm Katrina made her way to the Florida coast, gaining strength along the way. She glanced off of Florida as a Category 1 hurricane, then headed towards the Gulf of Mexico. The sea surface temperature in the Gulf of Mexico was an even warmer 87 degrees Fahrenheit, adding more energy to the Category 1 hurricane, and eventually, Hurricane Katrina hit a peak Category 5 hurricane status over the Gulf of Mexico. Heading for the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Katrina began to lose energy. But even though the hurricane lost energy, Katrina made landfall on the Louisiana coast as a Category 3 hurricane.
Even though Hurricane Katrina died down to a Category 3 hurricane, the coast of Louisiana was still battered by winds of over 100 miles per hour. The winds damaged several buildings and infrastructure, although many proved to be hurricane-proof. However, what follows a hurricane is what led to the mass flooding of New Orleans, and that was a storm surge. A storm surge is the rise in seawater level following a hurricane that is measured as the height of water above the predicted astronomical tide. This is caused by the hurricane winds pushing water on shore. In New Orleans, the storm surge measured between 10 and 20 feet, a staggering height for a city that averages 6 feet below sea level. With that amount of water being pushed on shore, the hurricane protection system of flood walls and levees was overtopped and overwhelmed, and its failure flooded the city.
There were two main types of failure that occurred in the hurricane protection system of flood walls and levees. The first type of failure that occurred was the water overpowering the eye walls. An eye wall is a type of wall built several feet into the ground to keep water out. The eye walls protecting the city of New Orleans had some major faults. They weren't built tall enough, they didn't go far enough into the ground, and the soils holding the eye wall in place were overestimated in strength. Water had overcome the height and strength of the walls and soil, pushing over the walls and breaching those areas. The second type of failure that occurred was the scouring of the levees. While water overcame the levees in height, it also disintegrated the levees and left flat grounds of entrance to the city. There weren't any scouring protection measures on top of these levees that were made of sand, silt, and other material that could easily be eroded away. Without any scouring protection, the levees simply washed away and were of no use holding back the canals, and water had entered the city in about 50 distinct locations.
After the levees failed, water entered New Orleans at an alarming rate. There was water coming in from all sides. The Gulf of Mexico, Lake Pontchartrain, and Lake Borgne made its way into the city, and water started rising at about 1 foot every 10 minutes. The last line of defense against the flooding, the pumping stations throughout the city, couldn't relieve the amount of water coming in. The electricity was knocked out, there were no people manning the pumping stations, and even if the pumps worked, the water would have gone back into the canals and flowed through the breaches, adding to the flooding. By September 1, 2005, 80% of New Orleans metropolitan area was flooded, with 2/3 of the flooding attributed to water flowing through the breaches and the rest attributed to rain from the hurricane. Several 100,000 people evacuated from the city, leaving New Orleans behind for good. Many of the people displaced by the storm were from lower income areas, finding it difficult to return and ended up settling permanently outside of New Orleans in places like Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta. Of the 73 neighborhoods in New Orleans, only 8 of them did not flood, and 30 of them were completely underwater, remaining uninhabitable today. Before Katrina, the population of New Orleans was an estimated 450,000 people. following Katrina, the population fell to just over 200,000 people, over half of the city left. The population has grown but is still under pre-Katrina numbers. As of 2018, New Orleans had a population of around 390,000 people with a slight shift in demographics. After the hurricane, people flocked to New Orleans to find jobs rebuilding the city, staying after finding long-term work. Because of this, in the evacuated lower-income areas, there is now a bigger percentage of white residents, a decrease in black residents, and a significant change to the Hispanic and Asian populations. The Hispanic and Asian populations jumped 5% and 2% respectively and continue to diversify the city even more. Today, more than half of the city's neighborhoods have recovered near 90% of their pre-Katrina populations, with some areas gaining more than their pre-Katrina numbers. The city continues to grow and is back on the map with more people moving there, and with tourists paying their big visits to the Big Easy.
As for the hurricane protection system, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers investigated the failed system and shed light on what went wrong. From operations to design to funding, so many corners were cut building the system. It was destined to fail an even smaller storm. They've learned their lesson and invested in a brand new $14.6 billion hurricane protection system that was completed in 2018. The current system is built to withstand another 100-year storm like Hurricane Katrina. However, the soil quality in New Orleans is so poor, the system's integrity won't last long and will have to be revised in 2023. Being in areas such at risk for flooding, the future of New Orleans is uncertain, but hopefully the cultural gem known as the Big Easy can withstand the trials of weather and continue to be a home to many and a top place to visit.